So if we're doing that, I might just shave a couple rounds.
Right. I did that in high
I'm
school.
already cheating in the quarterfinals, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, right. Everyone knows your tactics.
He's going to catch you in a live competition.
How was that? How was that, Pat? Did that affect you psychologically at all? Like just knowing that you're a class act, you play by the rules, and that here you are getting this ridiculous ding.
It's annoying, I think, more than anything. It's just like I'm grateful, frankly, that it didn't knock me out, because it did to a lot of people. Which my view of it is kind of like the guys who were fit enough to move fast got penalized. And a lot of people who were like, sitting there being like, well, I should have just hung on to those lockouts for longer. It's like, so if I spend a half a second every rep longer, just like really showing off a lockout, I'm just moving slow. Like I'm making the workout easier by moving slower. And it seems funny. Like you're just, a bunch of people got penalized, and some of whom, hired outside judging, like did all the things that you could reasonably be expected to do and more. And for their effort, they were rewarded with their season being ended. Like I think it's sad, frankly. Like, and I feel really bad for the people who got the really raw end. Like I have to start in a lower heat at semifinals, which is annoying for me. And I don't get to race the best guys in that first event. And that sucks. Like practically speaking, I feel like that's annoying and that bothers me a bit. Anything other than that is just noise and I'm annoyed by it. But I feel for the people who like Paige Powers or people like that got like absolutely fucked.
Nick and Paige are a true tragedy. Nick and Paige are a true
that's like, and those are people who are like for sure almost certainly would have qualified again, barring something catastrophic. And like Paige is a games contender. Like that's like, to sit with a straight face and be like, no, it was the right decision, we got the right people to the semifinals, is a joke. Like it's a joke. You're just lying to yourself.
I had her on the show. Obviously, she's young. I don't think it's an exaggeration that you say she's a contender, because she's young enough that we're going to see her get better every year. I want to say she took 8th in the games last year, and she said basically she was completely healthy and just fired up. Like she was like ready for the games this year as much as she's ever been. Yeah, that.
Well, and imagine that. And then you hired outside judging who are games judges to come do your thing, and then video review from like a bad angle way back here because you had to shoot 3 different movements. They go, oh, you can't. This is bad. It's like, says what the fuck, really? Like what else could she have done? Like really, what else could she have done other than move at 80% speed? And if that's what we're recommending that games athletes do now, is move at half speed to be safe, then what are we even doing here? We're in a race. The whole point is we're in a race.
She said something crazy mature too when she was on Pat. I basically said, hey, are you going to do like a poor me post? Like, how come you haven't gone on there and been like, hey, this fucking sucks, I worked hard? And she goes, well, because I have that opportunity to say something and get all those eyes on me, I'm going to use it to message something that's like outside of myself. I'm going to use that attention to point somewhere else. And I thought that was pretty fucking mature.
Yeah, could be. I think it's hard. It's hard to be athletes in those positions because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Like if you say something and be like, hey, we need to try to figure out a way to make this better so this doesn't happen anymore. And we try that every year, and some of these things continue to happen.
This is the worst thing ever, though. I think with Nick and Paige not making
it's the exact same thing that happened with the V-ups last year. The exact same thing.
Did anyone get booted last year? Any big names?
No, because last year they decided, this criteria was obviously unclear and too subjective, and they reversed a bunch of the major penalties. And then this year they just didn't. They were like, no, we stand by the penalties. And I think part of the problem is they didn't have time because they moved the quarterfinals closer to the semifinals. And they were like looking down the barrel of the Europe semifinal being like, fuck, we got 3 weeks. People have to plan and do things, and we don't have time to fiddle around and change the leaderboard. So, or come up with another solution. So they're just like, they were a bit handcuffed. And I don't think the quarterfinals should have been this close to semifinals. I think having it closer to the Open makes much more sense. So it's just like, it's a series of decisions that just led to like this perfect storm of like, oh, there's nothing we can do. But like, yeah, it's upstream. It's like everything you have to fix upstream to make sure you never got to this point. But it's hard. Like for someone like Paige, like I get that. And if you go, woe is me, like frankly, half the people on the internet are like, you're just a complainer, elite prima donna. and don't understand like what she's doing day to day, and like that this is like her livelihood that's been chopped out at the knees for an entire year. So it's like it's just hard. Like, what do you do in that position?
In her prime.
Like, you're,
in her prime.
I mean, fortunately for her, she is very young. Like, she's got lots
Yeah.
of years, right? Someone even
Right.
like Nick's like 33, 34. He's not like doesn't have a ton of years to compete at the games. So that's
right. They may have taken away
tough,
one of his
right?
last years. Yeah. Hey, what was the reason
so
for
those are always
yours? What
tough.
was the reason for yours? Was it that your second foot didn't touch, or they claimed that your legs were soft? What was the reason for yours? Did they tell you?
Yeah, soft knees, both knees and hips not extending at the same time on top of the box.
I was talking to Greg Glassman about it, and he said that as long as one leg wasn't soft, it doesn't even matter what the other leg was doing. He said that the whole
because you're standing up all the way. You've traveled all the way up, right? Anyway, I just kind of looked at it like if you look at it from far away and you go,
yeah,
is that guy doing step ups? It's like if nothing looks grossly off, then you're kind of fine. To really micromanage subjective criteria of movement standards in an online competition is impossible. And I think what CrossFit kind of found is as soon as they started doing that, the reality of like, oh, if I give, Paige a penalty and drop her to 600th in that workout, suddenly all those scores from 1 to 600 are in play, middling important athletes, like or middling someone who's been dropped out of contention. And those technically should all be reviewed now, but then that requires so much manpower that it's just impossible, right? So
those look great to me. The one.
So I think mostly what it is my left knee looks soft in most of them, and I don't disagree. Like, could I make it look better? Yeah, and I think part of it is the camera angle, because I angled the box to show a little bit of hip. Mostly what I learned from this is next time we have to do step ups, shoot it directly from the back so you can't see my knees or my hips, and then you can't penalize me for it because they didn't give us a mandatory camera angle. So any of the guys who filmed from the front or the back directly didn't get any penalties.
Interesting.
But if you filmed kind of from an angle, then you did, right? So it just, I just think it's, I have a judge who's there. She's kind of out of frame here, but you get a judge who takes their judge's course, stands right next to you, says the reps are good, and then they overrule the judge's call on the floor with secondary video review, which is the exact opposite of what we do in live competition. In live competition, the judge's call on the floor stands for subjective movement criteria, and we're not allowed to use outside camera media to increase the our potential for review. It's not only different, it's literally the opposite.
I haven't heard that argument.
So that's what I put in my appeal. I just said, like, I don't feel like from this camera angle there's adequate evidence to overrule the judge's call on the floor. And generally speaking, in competition, we're not allowed to use outside camera angles to change an appeal process. And they said,
did your judge feel bad?
Appeal is denied. Oh, she felt fucking terrible. It's one of the owners of our gym. And she was like ready to like write a letter, like do everything. She was like, felt the worst. So I was just like, it's fine. Like, again, at the end of the day, I'm like, look, I'm alive. It's okay. Like, I don't hate that like she felt that bad, but again, from my perspective, it's annoying and it sucks that this stuff is happening so regularly. I think it's an imperfect system with online competition. You just like, there isn't ever going to be a way to make it perfect. So the closest you can get is reducing the places that things like that can happen. Like, you make that step overs where it's really objective. Did you get over the box? The workout is the same. There's zero problem with review. It would have been just like no problem. Even choosing to me that to be the video that they review really heavily was like, it was probably the one workout we had with the most subjective movement criteria. So to choose to do that over video review is hard. It's giving yourself a really hard task. So anyway, I don't know. We've talked about it a little bit with a lot of athletes and a lot of people, and see if there's ways that we can improve it. I don't think CrossFit's trying to fuck everybody up. I think they're just like making mistakes, like people make mistakes sometimes, but it's happening on a big scale. And, unfortunately it seems to be happening kind of every year.
And like you said, it's happening to big names. If it wouldn't have happened to you, if it wouldn't have happened to Paige, if it wouldn't have happened to Nick, if it wouldn't have happened to Sydney Wells, there probably wouldn't be as much attention to it.
Not as much for sure, but I still think there really should be. Like, I think the problem is just
right. I agree.
We're reviewing subjective criteria on online video submission. Like, we just need to be really careful with the movements we put in online competition, because otherwise you're making yourself as the organization. Like, if I was going to create an online competition, I was going to review all the videos or a large percentage of them, I would want to make the movements easily reviewable. And I get that stifles creativity a little bit, but that's just a necessary evil for that stage of competition. And then once you go to live competition, if you put step-ups like that in live competition, zero problem. Because as soon as if I get one no rep, I'm like, oh shit, okay, I got to go like a little more. I got to do a little something. I can even ask my judge and take 5 seconds. And instead of getting 50 rep penalty, I lose 2 reps.
Right.
But instead, a week later, people are getting these massive penalties and there's nothing you can do about it. And you're like, well, I would have done something differently and even mitigated the damage to just be a fraction of what it was, but you don't have that chance anymore. And that's the hard part of online competition, is there's just like, you cannot react. And that's why subjective movement criteria should be removed as much as it can be. Anyway, but that's the thing. It's like, it sucks that it kind of taints the quarterfinals, the last couple of years, that there was just trouble.